All right, we are going to jump in. Welcome to another edition of XenTegra's Webinar Wednesdays. Today, I got a great guest and returning vendor, Zadara, and we're going to be talking about putting the Z in your edge compute strategy. There's a cool announcement that we'll talk about. And I got a good guest today, Mr. Doug Jury. I'm going to stop my share so we can see our heads for a little bit, Doug, if you don't mind. And yeah, Doug, if you want to take a quick minute to introduce yourself to the guest today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Pete. Thanks to the whole XenTegra team. I'm Doug Jury. I'm the VP of Partner Enablement and Partner Marketing. I've been here pretty much since the start back in 2011. And so I've got a lot of stories to share with you. Been in the storage industry for better part of 40 years. And I've seen some things that we can talk about today. So anyway, thanks so much, Pete.
Yeah, thanks for joining me again. And behind the scenes, as always, we got Megan. So Megan, say hi to everybody. And again, everybody be nice to Megan. She's the one who gets you your Uber Eats gift card. So,
hey everyone, it's Megan here. Look forward to today's webinar with Zadara.
All right, folks, let's jump in and kind of talk through. So questions, as always, are encouraged. I'm going to check the Q&A dialogue. Remember, the Q&A dialogue is available to all, and you can be anonymous if you want, and attendees can upvote and comment on questions. So questions are definitely encouraged. Today's agenda is simple as always. We do some polling, and then I pass the baton over to Doug and let him do his thing and talk about Zadara. I'm excited because there's a big change from last year. So if you attended last year's webinar, we got a lot to talk about in an announcement that they just made yesterday. Webinars.XenTegra.com. Head over there. We got a great guest next week, Light Networks. We're talking about your WAN. You definitely want to attend this one. Great conversation around how to optimize your WAN and some of the things you need to consider. Events.XenTegra.com. A lot of great events next week. Everything from my Azure workshop to a couple other workshops. Tomorrow we have our NetScaler workshop. Unfortunately, that thing is chock full, and we have a full house tomorrow. Podcast.XenTegra.com. Check out all the various podcasts. We have everything from iJoule, Nutanix, Citrix, and VMware. Andy, our founder and CEO, loves to do them. And then finally, yes, we will be giving out Uber Eats to everybody who attends in full. And we will get those out within 24 hours of the event. And then we are doing some fun giveaways this month. I got the Sony PlayStation 5. I got a couple t-shirt packs and a XenTegra hat that I'll be giving away for all attendees for the month of February. And then I'll talk about this later, how to get into our drawing for the Bronco. So bronco.XenTegra.com. There's actually a couple ways you can do it. And Zadara can play indirectly to that as well. So pretty cool. All right, so let's do some polls here, have a little fun. All right, so let's get everybody warmed up. I'm going to launch the poll. This is my first XenTegra event /workshop/webinar. And if you're a new attendee, let us know. And if you're returning, welcome back. And then, whatever the closest to your role is, just to get an idea of who we have on the phone today. Again, these polls are anonymous. We can't see who's answering on the screen, and nor can other attendees see who is answering on the screen. I like to put that out there so you're not nervous or worried. So I like to get at least 70% or more of the audience involved. So I'll give a couple more seconds. Going once, twice, and last call. All right. So we got a lot of new folks today. So welcome. And for those returning, welcome back. And we got a good spread of folks on the phone from all types of roles. And we're going to cover some of the cool aspects of Zadara. Doug tells a great story and I love it. So, all right, let's talk about Zadara. So just a couple fun questions here. I am familiar with enterprise storage as a service, and, be honest here, because, we're going to talk a little bit about this, but we're going to be talking about more about compute and one of the big announcements that was made, but storage is a big piece of that. My enterprise spends too much on storage. Again, answer from your perspective, and then finally, my enterprise uses this primary vendor for block file and object storage. So pick the vendor that is close. Obviously I could list a whole slew of them. I put the usual suspects that are out there today. And if you're other, put other. And if you want to chat me what you use, I'd be curious because I might add them to the list at some point. So, all right, last call for clicks, going once, going twice, and last call. All right, so we got a lot of folks who say they're familiar with storage as a service, but I think once you hear what Zadara does, You're going to be pretty wowed. Do you spend too much on storage costs? I, the beholder, I would argue we all spend too much on storage costs, because you know what? At the end of the day, we over purchase for the future, and we might not utilize that storage until a later date, or we never use that storage. So I would argue we all spend too much on storage. And then finally, my enterprise uses XYZ vendor, Dell EMC on top, but HPE has a strong presence alongside a NetApp and other. So we'll have to figure out who some of those others are at some point. All right, final step, just some fun industry stuff that I know plays into the conversation a little bit today. My enterprise is using Azure AD today. Are you cloud only or hybrid? My enterprise is evaluating or using an infrastructure as a service compute environment today. So AWS, Microsoft Azure, but the compute side of the house. All right. What model of M365 are you on-premise / hybrid, online, Exchange Online? You're not there yet. It's not even on your radar, or you're a Google Chrome enterprise shop. And then finally, what does your remote worker strategy look like? And are you running any kind of thin devices in your production environment today? And again, I'll let you guys answer this. Couple fun questions here around the infrastructure as a compute. And we're going to talk about a little bit of edge computing today. So, all right, last call for clicks, going once, going twice, and final call. All right, so here's our polling results. So we got a lot of hybrid identity, which is good, because if you're starting to look into Azure services, it makes life a lot easier. A lot of Azure customers in the room today, but a good chunk of AWS and some Google Cloud Platform. But still in the no bucket, which if you're in the no bucket, we might have an option for you. Exchange M365, still a lot of folks on hybrid. This is a big trend that I'm still seeing. And one of the things I always tell everybody, if you're not familiar with Fast Track, Microsoft Fast Track, let us know. We can educate you on what that is and how it can help you potentially leverage more of your 365 investment. And then kind of a spread here on the work from home. And then finally, a little spread here on the devices, but a lot of no's still. So interesting on the device side of the house. All right. So with that, thanks for taking the polls. And if you're not following Zadara or XenTegra on any type of social media, please do give us a follow on LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. It helps us make sure you see some of the cool stuff we're putting out there. This does get recorded and eventually posted to our YouTube channel. All right, Mr. Doug, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take the screen share and let you present what Zadara is and does and what's new since we last talked.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's see. This will stop others. Okay, off we go. And you guys should now be seeing pretty much what I'm seeing.
Perfect. Yep.
Good to go. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Like I said, I'm Doug Jury. I've been here pretty much since the start of Zadara. Boy, we've seen things come and go, and it's been so much fun to kind of work this ride through this whole thing. We were born to do just what I'm going to explain today. This is why this company came together. Zadara is sort of the second mission of a team of executives and engineers. The first mission was storage networking technology, and we basically worked that for about 10 years. We sold that business off to LSI, the Ingenio product group. People might know that a little bit. And then we all basically left LSI and came over here to start Zadara. So some very exciting things that we're going to talk about today. First of all, I'm going to get up and I'll talk about what the heck is going on out there. And this will give you a little bit of insight. We're going to listen to our customers. I did some polling questions at a VMUG. About 100 people joined the VMUG a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to share some of that. I thought was really interesting data that came in on that one. Then we're going to introduce our cloud services. We break it into zCompute, zStorage, isolation model, a little kind of some edgy configurations, and we'll talk about that. You can't talk today about cloud and infrastructure and storage as a service and compute as a service without talking about edge. I mean, because I'd love to think that Amazon and Azure have answered all your questions, but based on the survey polls that we just asked, they haven't answered a lot of your questions. So we're going to hopefully do some of that today. Then we're going to talk about repatriation. What's going on out there to cause people to repatriate? There were a lot of people that took their chips and they went, "Hey, I'm all in. I am going to go AWS. I am going to go Azure." But you know what? We're finding that it isn't exactly what people thought in some cases. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about a use case on edge digital transformation, on edge production and backup. And then we're going to throw in a little bit of ransomware on the back end, and then we'll summarize the whole thing. So let's go ahead and just kind of absorb ourselves in this a little bit. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this and explain what I find when I talk to enterprises. So you folks out there are from enterprises. I saw there's some decision makers, there's some directors of IT and ops people out there. And so I'm going to take you down what I consider to be the Zadara experience. And the Zadara experience is going to take you from, let's start at the top one, migrating data between clouds, DCs, data centers, colos, all this stuff that's going on out there. People want a more elegant way of moving data around. They want to be able to say, hey, I moved all into the cloud, but now I'm realizing that I don't want to do this. I don't want to have this lock-in, typo. Don't want to have this lock-in in maybe the hyperclouds. I want to be able to move things around a little bit better. I'm finding that the ingress and egress fees are costing a little bit too much, perhaps. I want to have consistent performance. As we all know, the way the hyperclouds work is you're kind of a big part of a pool. And I'll talk about Verizon in just a moment and why that was such an interesting use case for me to kind of get the religion here. Cost savings and predictability. So suffice to say, people are moving basically away from the clouds, not for all their applications, but for some. Then the other thing is people are looking to model their compute and storage as a service. Pete and I were just talking, we got in a little early. We said, I think the storage as a service or the storage industry has done a pretty good job of converting things over to OpEx, even though a lot of it is still traditional purchases with some financing, some leasing, some things like that. You may not be able to scale up, scale down, pay by the hour. You might not be able to do that, but I think people have done a reasonably good job of at least explaining some of that. But the compute portion of it, if you're not in a hypercloud today, it's really, really difficult to find your ability to do compute as a service. So we're going to talk about that today as well. Full set of OpEx services without committing to perhaps a hypercloud. This isn't an all-in. Your IT strategy should not be an all-in strategy on anything. It should be a little bit of everything. Needing your cloud services closer to the source of the data. Right now, there's 4 US AWS sites across the US, and so you have to choose from the East Coast or the West Coast. Azure has some central as well, but you've got to kind of pick their sites. And what if you want your data and your compute closer to the point of need, closer to where the data is created, closer to where your office is perhaps, but you don't want to put it in your DC. You might need lower latencies, higher performance. You might need those kind of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about edge and how we can start to populate this. Utilize local partnerships like XenTegra's knowledge and infrastructure and part of their MSP services to be able to maybe do a DR target or a backup target into one of their data centers as well. Not being simply a number. And I don't know whether you get great support out of some of the large hyperclouds. I know I have some accounts there and I don't. Sometimes I have to hang on hold for a little bit. So sometimes it's really nice to work with some local folks and then needing to keep your IT resources current at a reduced cost in some cases. We can basically give you more dense drives at a lower cost. And we see that happening across the board. So like I said, I had some polling questions and I did this at a VMUG a couple of weeks ago. And so the first question I asked, and this was part of an as a service and a disaster recovery and backup type of venue. I said, where do you deploy most of your IT resources today? And I let them answer more than one, of course, some multiple choices. And so here, 44% said that they're hyperclouds like AWS or Azure. So that's almost in line with what Pete showed today. That's really good. 11% said MSP locations and other clouds, perhaps. 55% on-prem. I love this poll because if you look at 50 and then 40, 50%, 55% and 44%, that's about what the industry says. I didn't charge you a lot of money to do this poll, but it's real recent data. And this is really what's going on. And then colocation sites. People are starting to certainly dabble a lot in colocation sites. If I asked this crowd, I bet I would get very similar numbers. I asked basically who has jumped into the deep end with OpEx and monthly consumption. Now, I don't want you to equate OpEx with monthly consumption. It's different sometimes. OpEx says I'm going to work out of an operating expense. Monthly consumption, even hourly consumption says I'm only going to be charged for what I use. So in this case, about 20% were at the low end, 80% were at the higher or mid-range end, but nobody had taken the up on higher than 50% on this particular poll question. So everybody's kind of 50-50 here, or a lot of pieces are. And then I talked to a bunch of different challenging topics that day about what was going on. And I find this very interesting. 85% of the people on that said upgrading my infrastructure without downtime and huge costs. Basically, if you're in a CapEx model and you want to refresh, you typically have to buy another CapEx model, another device. And then you may, or if you don't want to do that, sometimes the maintenance fees might go up. There's all kinds of things that are going on here. So suffice to say, people are saying, I want to keep my technology fresh and new. I don't want to basically spend a whole lot to keep it that way. That was number one. Migrating between clouds and colocation and on-prem, just like what we said in the previous slide, it matched up pretty good. And then designing this OpEx model. So let's go ahead and spend a little bit of time on this guy. You're expert in managed cloud services. We started on day one with the big idea that we were going to build a cloud storage and a compute service. We were going to build it. And now the storage was first. And as Pete alluded to, we just bought a company called Neocarm that basically brought us into the compute world. So I'll talk about that in a sec. So I'm going to say that off to the left, enterprise grade performance and security. You could probably put on that Pure, EMC, NetApp, IBM, HPE. You could put in there that everybody has enterprise grade performance and security. That's table stakes. That's what you've chosen today as your best in breed. They have in-flight and at-rest encryption, snapshots, mirroring, highly available systems. You can pick between SSDs and hard drives. You can do a lot of things here. Now, I'm going to show you my architecture in just a little bit, and you're going to basically say, oh, that's pretty cool. I don't think I've ever heard of that. So if you're going to pick up 3 or 4 learnings today, it's going to be one on our architecture. So like I said, that's table stakes. You got to have that. But the big thing is, what if you built that? What if you had the luxury of building that architecture with cloud DNA inside it? What do I mean by that? I want my array to tell me who has what and where. I want my array to tell me if they scaled up or scaled down. I want to be able to spit out a bill so you know exactly what's being billed for each of your departments so you can charge back to your internal customers. I want to be able to do this all at an OpEx model. I want to build into it hardware upgrades included. I want to build a business model around this where I can actually make a living out of taking enterprise grade performance and security on the left and making it 100% cloudy, 100% exactly what we need to manage this. On-prem, in a colo, in the cloud, up and down, however you want. And then the far right-hand side is, if we're going to pull off the other two, we've got to have 24/7, 365, not just simple maintenance fees that you may pay for today. But if we're going to manage 300 clouds, which you're going to see in a minute, and 1,000 by the end of the year, you're going to see that this product has to scale not just from a performance and a scalability perspective up to 30, 40 petabytes of storage, but it also has to scale from the human element. It has to be able to have these migrations, the upgrades, the technical resources, the ability to keep things fresh and new. Let's say that you have a drive failure last night. It would automatically heal itself to a surviving drive in the environment, whether it be in a public cloud, a private cloud, in your colo, wherever it happens to be. But let's say you're going to run out of storage at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's a different puzzle. We will automatically add more storage to it, and then we'll give you a call in the morning and say, hey, we just added another 14 terabytes to your array or to your volume to basically completely preclude or mitigate the potential issue that you might have had by maybe you weren't watching the store. 100% as a service. Just like renting an Avis car, you don't have to worry about a lot of things. So fully featured, fully elastic, and fully managed. If we do that right, we're going to basically bring some nice logos to the market. I've got a story for each one of these. I was the first sales guy at Zadara for the first couple of years as we basically build our beachhead. And so a lot of these came from some of the first years. They've been with us 6, 7, 8 years, a lot of these companies. And so here's some of ours. I'll share the Verizon story with you when I get into architecture. That's an interesting one. Ancestry is a great story. I'll share that with you as well. Omnitrax is a long haul trucker GPS management company that basically allows their drivers to electronically and digital transformation, allows them to drive by the way stations by having this uptime. Now, they need their solutions edgy. They need to have the edges all over the country and things like that. So Omnitrax has been able to do that. FTI Consulting, a large law firm, e-discovery company in the 6 or 7 petabytes of storage today, all living in an AWS environment in that particular case. And then a lot of hybrid customers are in here as well. So you may recognize some of these logos. And then we're just kind of setting the table here to get into some of the technology and some of the questions that we might get. So here we have our 300 clouds across 6 different continents. Now, if you imagine, if you will, that I think Amazon today has 24 clouds and we have 300. So we had to have built this product differently. We had to have scaled this differently from a human element, from a capacity element, and so forth. We even got this little remote edge thing up in the Peruvian mountains up here. That's a real edge solution. It's a mining company that basically is monitoring their equipment out here. So they have no possibility of finding a hyper cloud up in the mountains in Peru. But you know what? They're enjoying as a service storage and as a service compute without having to have a hyper cloud close to them. That's the whole concept of edge. That's the whole concept of putting it where you need it, when you need it, at the right size that you need without having to pay a lot of overages. So let's talk a little bit about the solution. And this is what Pete alluded to. This zCompute up here. So here we call this Zadara Cloud Services. And Zadara Cloud Services, you might see it as ZCS. It comes with different elements, different increments of capabilities here. So let's talk about, let me just start at the bottom here for a minute. Z-Storage, that's what we've been doing for 9 years. You might have heard of it if you've heard of Zadara, Virtual Private Storage Array, or VPSA. And our idea here was to be able to do block, file, and object as a service in the same hardware architecture with the ability to predict and prepare the type of performance, the type of availability, the type of everything you need. Because we all know that if you do NetApp to do your file, and you have EMC to do your block, and you do Cloudian perhaps to do your object, if you have too much storage here in the object, but you need more storage in block, they're different disk sleds, they're different architecture, they're different everything. So I can't share this across a single architecture. I'm going to show you our single architecture in just a few minutes. So we've been doing that for 9 years, and it's been working extremely successful. Again, colocation in your data center, in the hyperclouds, wherever you want. The company we just bought, Neocarm, has basically created what we're going to call zCompute services, which is an EC2. Everybody, if you're working at Amazon, EC2 compatible APIs. So you could literally, if for some reason you're not happy with Amazon, you could pick up your application out of Amazon, put it on zCompute, and everything you've learned and you've coded and everything you've done would basically fall right in. There's no reprogramming. If you simply want to run Microsoft or Linux applications, then that's exactly what these virtual machines are all about, is simply run your Microsoft or your Linux applications on this. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. Elastic compute. So we're basically going to create this capabilities where if they need to scale up to a larger compute or a larger EC2 server, you can. Load balancers for your networking. All the things that you know and love about AWS will work here. If you aren't in AWS today, don't worry about it. You can basically just create Microsoft and Linux virtual machines. So together, I have compute as a service. I have storage as a service. If we're running in your data center, we're running in your colo, your entire IT infrastructure now can be as a service. Your colocation space is as a service, because you're basically maybe paying to XenTegra or Equinix or CoreSite or whomever that happens to be. So that's as a service. So you can now pretty much flush your entire CapEx budget out the window and do this. Now, the real cool thing is if you need 10 or 20 virtual machines for zCompute, you basically create them. If you need to drop back to 15, you drop back 15. If you need to create 100 terabytes of storage, but you find that 50 is quite nice, then drop back to 50. It doesn't really matter. It's completely as a service.
So, Doug, so quick
Yeah,
question.
go, Pete.
I'll try to kick off a couple questions here, but so I look at this, right? And I look at this and say, so in your kind of words, how does this differ from hyper-converged? So is this similar to hyper-converged? Is this hyper-converged, or is it still a 3-tiered architecture?
It's a 3-tiered architecture. It has compute, storage, and networking. Hyper-converged is an interesting one. If I need more compute, I got to buy more storage. If I need more storage, I got to buy more compute. They're kind of tied together. In this particular case, I have free will. I can buy more compute when I have plenty of storage. I can buy more storage when I have plenty of compute. Generally, they do not happen at the same point in time. And so this is not hyper-converged. This is basically 2 isolated environments brought together with networking, just like your typical IT today, using virtual machines instead of VMware.
And then is the zCompute, what's the hypervisor underneath?
The hypervisor underneath is, for this one, is KVM.
Cool.
But we never expose it. Never expose it. All you're going to get is virtual machines out of this.
All right, cool. That's pretty cool. So, So is it safe to say any type of workload can run on this if it's supported by the vendor?
Either by the Microsoft or Linux, absolutely, or EC2.
Okay.
Just like an AMI on Amazon today. Exactly right. If you go over to maybe Azure, you're basically going to be embracing the Microsoft operating system environment that we basically stand up on top of that hypervisor.
Cool.
Yep. Excellent. Great questions. So let's delve into zCompute a little bit more, and we're going to start to remember this icon here. zCompute is just a bunch of virtual machines. Put it in colo, private, public, whatever. We basically have the ability, here we go, have the ability to create this self-service compute provisioning. You literally go through, and I'll show you this in just a second, but you literally go through just a couple of clicks and you now have a virtual machine. I was at a Starbucks not too long ago, and I was basically I was ordering a latte. So I went up to the latte, up to the counter, and I said, I need a caramel macchiato, whatever it was. And then I gave him my name and I sat back down and I said, oh crap, I needed to put together a zCompute and a zStorage for my demo. So I went in, I connected into my cloud. I clicked four buttons. I clicked on zCompute. I clicked on zStorage. I basically had an entire virtual machine, Microsoft environment ready to go. And then I heard, Doug, your latte's ready. I was able to create an IT data center before Starbucks could make a caramel macchiato. How about that, Pete?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. So, I'm sitting here thinking, how the heck do I get one of these in my office here?
There you go. You need it. You need it. So we have this pre-customizable instant types, just like you would imagine, auto scale groups, all the various things here. Now we're going to use, if you're familiar with AWS, they use something called EBS. Because this is a kind of an EC2 compatibility thing, we're going to use our storage, but we're going to create it. We're going to stand it up so it looks like an EBS volume just for the boot drive and the OS drive. So there's not a whole lot, nothing has to change from basically pulling this up and as well. So let's say that I'm talking to the mid-Atlantic area. You've got a data center there. You've got our hardware there, and you basically click on zCompute. You literally click on the site, you click on the size of the instance, you click on it, and voila, you now have, just like I did from that Starbucks, you now have a zCompute environment. So again, the technology came from NeoCarm. It was a perfect marriage because they were doing really cool virtualization, virtual machine things, just like we do storage virtualization things and create these virtual private storage arrays. Now we're basically mirroring those into the same graphical interfaces, the same band of products, if you will, the same pay-as-you-go, charged by the hour. You can't get it wrong, up and down, wherever you go. So now, this is the real cool one. I want all of you now to look at this slide with intensity. Where do I put this hardware? Oh, I can put it in a service provider over here. Maybe I got a great partnership over here with XenTegra, and I'm going to put it there. I can put it in my colocation. I can put it in my end user data center. And I can basically make this all one big pane of glass where I can start to manage a lot of this. So I can put wherever I want. Now, the hyperclouds here, I'm not going to talk about the hyperclouds right now because really they're mutually exclusive. I'm probably not going to run Amazon and zCompute on the same application. So they're going to be different. But when you get into storage, you're going to see that I've got some really cool stuff for you there. So zStorage.
So Doug, is it fair to say that this is kind of UCS done right?
Sort of, except UCS allows you to, well, I mean, I guess we would allow you to bring your own storage as well, because sometimes UCS, you get to bring your own storage. But yes,
Yeah.
Remember one thing that I said is before there was a single piece of sheet metal bent, a circuit created, a line of code written, the concept here was we want this to be geographically dispersed in the cloud without having a human have to basically stand over it to manage it, monitor it, upgrade it, any of that. It's not an aftermarket. It's not a let's make it work. Let's force fit it in. Let's basically do this from day one. I have a great story. VMS and digital. I don't know how many people out there remember VMS and digital VAXes. VMS was the first operating system that was written before the hardware was designed. They wrote VMS and then they designed it. Everything else, you look at Microsoft, it was written towards a Pentium, or it was written for, a chip technology under a RISC or a CISC, a chip technology. This was designed before we did anything, before we wrote a single line of code. This was designed in concept as to how we wanted this to work. So Z storage, we've been doing this for 9 years now. It basically adheres all the media types, all the block file and object, and anywhere you want it to be. So now your brain can explode a little bit and go, wow, I could build, let me think about this stuff. Could I build a solid state environment for high performance, maybe a hard drive and cache hybrid for my NAS and CIFS and NFS, maybe hard drive for backup and archival? Well, you just did my presentation. Yes, you're thinking the right things. You could do that. Let's say, could I put my high performance on block, my file on NFS and CIFS, and my backup on object? You sure could. Can I put it a little bit in my data center and then do a mirror out to the cloud or a colo? You sure could. So what do? Same site in Mid-Atlantic. I click on storage array. I click on object storage. I create them. My latte's ready. My storage is ready. I'm off and running. So now, I knew it was coming, so I shared that story with you. So here's a customer that came in and says, I'd like SSD drives. So they and here, when they're creating their array, they click on SSD drives. They click on the size of engine they need, and we give you all kinds of recommendations as to how big you need for the amount of IOPS and things like this. So we know that. So you're going to take a 400 engine and 4 drives. So what does that mean? When we wrote all this and we put all this together, and we now have patents on this, which is really cool because I tell you, I've been around for 40 years in the industry doing storage, and I thought all the storage patents were pretty much gobbled up. But this patent is simple. We're going to take this software-defined storage stack, these storage nodes, we call them. These are just x86 servers. We're going to take the cores, the disks, the networking, the cache, the memory. We're going to take all that, and we're going to basically identify the resources in this architecture. Okay, follow with me here. So in this particular case, the customer says, I want a VPSA, and I'm going to create it with a 400 engine and 4 drives. So what we do is we dedicate these 2 cores up here for this customer, and these 2 cores for standby. So we have active and standby RAID controllers. Does that sound familiar to you? But they're virtual. I don't have to go out there and swap boards or do anything if I have to upgrade them. I can just add more cores to this and make it go faster. So I have my cores that are active and standby RAID controllers, and I've identified the 4 drives here. Now, those 4 drives are physical drives. They're not virtual. When you go to a public cloud, you're going to be part of a 1,000 drive pool. And you don't know where your data is, and they're going to try to optimize this to the best performance. But if I give you 4 dedicated SSD drives, you're going to get the performance that you prescribed. Nobody else can butt in here. Let's say this is General Motors and this is Ford. These 2 VPSAs have an air gap between them. This guy can't run all these new CAD diagram analysis only for General Motors to suffer from performance. And that's what happens. That's called the noisy neighbor syndrome in a lot of the public environments today. My Verizon story, I promised it for you. Verizon came to me and they said, Doug, do you know where my data is? And I said, of course. He said, do you know what drive my data is going to be on? And I said, of course. He said, how can you do that in Amazon or Azure can? And I said, we create a multi-tenant architecture but a single tenant experience. The single tenant experience simply says, I know where everything is in your VPSA. So therefore, I know where your drives are. I said, why do you care? And they said, if we have a drive failure, if you have a drive failure, which will happen, and we've had them for about 6 years now, and we've had several drive failures, of course, but nothing ever happened because these are protected by RAID. So if we have a drive failure, I need you to ship that drive back to my facility so I can shred it, because I can't go to sleep at night if there's a drive out there sitting in a dumpster somewhere. So I have to shred it. The reason we won that conversation with Verizon is because of this architecture. Now, second person comes in, they want a VPSA. They're going to use hard drives and maybe add some cache to it. And then the third one says, I'd like to build a VP or an object storage, maybe for my backup target, and I'd like to do this with immutability and so forth. And now in this architecture, I've taken a EMC Dell, a NetApp, and an object storage array, and I put it all into the same architecture, but I've been able to create identities for each of these specific to that customer and that use case. And if I build this for the cloud to have thousands of customers in the Amazon environments, I basically needed to do this kind of an architecture. So where do I put this? You're familiar with this slide now. I can put it in your MSP, I can put it in your colo, or I can put it in your end user data center. Now, I've introduced a new concept here, and the new concept I have is Direct Connect, Express Route, and Partner Interconnect. Now it makes sense to put my storage, what we call cloud adjacent, next to the hyperclouds. And now the hyperclouds, I can actually mount my array as a block file object device from an Amazon. So let's say you're a customer that says, I'd like to keep my compute in Amazon. It seems to be working good, but the storage is left a little wanting. Maybe I want to connect to your storage in the cloud adjacent environment. So you would do that through Direct Connect or Partner or Express Route or whatever. And we have a lot of customers. This is really how we grew it. So our Z storage is our own storage device connecting into Amazon with basically very low latency. But let's say you need uber latency, low latency. Okay, watch it. Now I'm going to add right next to it Z storage and zCompute. Holy cow, what did we just do? Now I've created Amazon environments, Azure environments, Google environments, really wherever I want them to be, 100% as a service, pay for what you use, up and down, just exactly. And if you wanted to do it cloud adjacent, you could keep some of it running down in Amazon, but your really good low latency applications and high performance, you could run up here in perhaps Equinix or Ashburn or wherever you want to do it. So this is not just slideware here. We're shipping this every day of the week. Z storage, been shipping that for 9 years. zCompute, been shipping that for about 4 months. We just announced our acquisition, but we've been shipping this for a while. So no longer is geography a problem for you. No longer is latency a problem for you. I got some use cases I want to take you through. Here's a repatriation project that I worked on, okay? So before, the customer was over here. They were connecting our storage into the EC2 environment. They were getting around 1 to 2 millisecond latency. They said they wanted microsecond latency. So they have about 60,000 concurrent security events. This is not a schleppy application. 60,000 people certifying their logins from a security perspective. They need linear scale. They needed basically sub-millisecond response. This is how we got them going. But then what we did was we said, keep your data right on the same storage. There's no need to move your 150 terabytes. We're going to basically now put you on our zCompute. And now you're going to basically get rid of the latency. We're going to put it basically cohabitated in the same racks. And now you're going to get sub-millisecond latencies. And you're going to have now created this cloud environment, if you will, in an edge kind of an edge footprint. So if you're running on the left and you want maybe a little bit better performance, we've got many customers that are repatriating. They're moving away. Maybe not everything. I don't expect them to move everything. There's some things, the web and some of their other stuff is working extremely well that doesn't have this caliber of requirements and performance. The next use case is I'm going to take a customer that basically has scanners. They're scanning in data over, let's say, in the central part of the country. And they're using our storage and our compute. Now, the ultimate goal here is to get that data to an Amazon site So they can now create the derivatives and the digital transformation from digitized or from scanned images into digitizing it. And then they also want to move it out to S3 because that's where they're going to send that off to some of their vendors. So we were able to bridge the 2,000-mile gap, bring the data in off of microfilms, process it, ship it over 2,000 miles away, have Amazon run it on EC2, and then basically save a copy out to S3. All this works today, been running for 5 years in a customer environment. The last use case I want to talk about here is Edge Core Edge. So now I basically have, let's say that I'm in Texas, and I basically have a colocation environment here, maybe a partner here, and they've stood up some compute and some storage in the middle here. Now, they want their zCompute and their zStorage, or they need their compute and their storage kind of cohabitated with their need. They want it to be edgy. They want it to be closer to the point of need. They have a couple, they have, several different, what they call robo sites, right? Remote office, remote business. So they basically have this, but they really want to, they don't want to have their entire infrastructure there. They want to be able to move the DRs and the backup copies back to the central point. So here we can now spin up everything on this is 100% as a service, never pay a CapEx, never pay for anything until you start to use it. And now we can put this entire environment together from edge back to core, using our fine partners like XenTegra to be able to do this and maybe do the DR and the backup as a service. Advantages over this and that is we've got 300 cloud-ready compute and storage environments out there. Amazon right now has 4 inside the US. 2 of these are GovClouds. So if you're not a government agency, there's 4 here in North America, actually 1 up in Montreal today. So the map is very telling that a lot of times customers want their data closer to their need. They want to be able to do the things that they simply can't do, but they don't want to give up that OpEx. That OpEx is that silver nugget, that golden nugget that they want to basically have, that they move their business model over to that. Now, I know everybody and ransomware. In fact, I just saw an article that there's another couple of ransomware targets out there. Something else is going on out there. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to really explain to you how logical Zadara's infrastructure is to basically put together some ransomware with our partners from Veeam. So they've identified this zip code, and I actually Googled the zip code, and it's a small town in Florida, which I kind of chuckle because I'm in Southwest Florida. So, but they call it the zip code. And basically it says, I want to have 3 different copies of my data. I want to have 2 different media types. I want to have one which is offsite, one which is immutable or air gapped. Now, think about a tape that I put it into a tape library or whatever. I put the data on it, I pull it out, and I put it in a drawer somewhere. That's air gapped. Well, nobody can afford to do that today from a human perspective or whatever, although there's a lot of tape libraries still out there. I sold some through ATL and Quantum for many years. But there's a better way to do this with object storage to be able to do this immutability and this air gapping. And then I want to be able to test that using backup and recovery and verification. So 32110 is really the start of a really good one. Now, if you only want to start with just a simple backup, that's absolutely fine if you have other measures. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking the same icons that you've now become very familiar with as I've trained on this. Remember, I talked about SSDs, I talked about hard drives, I talked about object storage. So here I have primary storage over here. Could be whatever your choosing is. And I'm not saying that you need to upgrade that right away, although you will want to once you have a refresh cycle coming up for perhaps a Dell or a NetApp or a Pure. You may want to jump ship and come over to all as a service model on this side. But I'm not gonna require that for this ransomware backup or recovery. So basically, we're going to be running Veeam, and we're going to do our first backup on site to a performance tier. Why are we going to put that on SSDs? Well, we're going to do that because we want our recovery. We got an RPO and an RTO we got to deal with. Recovery point objective, recovery time objective. I need my recovery time to be quick. I want to be able to recover this quickly. So basically, I'm going to put my first copy over here on perhaps SSD. Then I'm going to have some offsite stuff going on here. So I'm going to basically do a secondary tier on hard drives, maybe a factor of 50 or 30% of this tier here. So now I'm gonna, and I don't need the full tier up here sometimes. Sometimes I'm gonna, maybe I'm only gonna keep this for 7 days and I'm gonna have this for months or whatever. So I'm gonna basically build the schedule out. So now I have it down here, the same set of tools and technologies you've been using everywhere else. And then I have this Zadara object storage with the lock on it, which is basically the long-term retention that will allow it to be in an object storage format that cannot be rewritten. You set the clock, you set the timer, and you can say, this data cannot be written to for 2 years, this file. And it basically is going to lock it. There's a standard that's out there right now that a lot of these backup companies are addressing and writing to. But you know what? The hardware manufacturers have to have the same type of what they call record lock and immutability record lock. So you've got to have that. And then how do you know it works? Well, you want to basically have this be able to spin up a copy, test it for 2 hours, and then make it go away. You don't want to own that storage forever. You just want to spin it up and test it. So we have 3 different copies. We have 2 different media types, object and block. We have 1 offsite. We have 1 that's air-gapped with immutability. And then we have our ability to test this using our backup and recovery. So we've now met the need with the same exact technology I've been talking to. We now have the need to be able to do 32110. So let's recap. What I think I did today is I basically explained to you what we've learned is migrating data between clouds, DCs, colos, all with the same set of tools, technologies, and techniques. Everything on my screen today, all 32 slides or whatever we went through, is 100% OpEx. I do not have a CapEx bone in my body. There's not going to be a hidden fee. There's not going to be something I forgot about. Basically, it's compute and storage as a service, 100% OpEx. I need to move my data, my cloud services closer to the source of the data on dedicated hardware. I want to be able to isolate. I want to be able to have 10 departments in my company all have their own VPSA and their own zCompute. And I want to be able to get billing, thank you very much, that tells me how I can do a chargeback to these rascals so I know exactly how much they consume. If you're doing LUN management today or Excel spreadsheet chargeback, that is a better way to do that than perhaps what you're doing today. Use any MSP colocation for DR, for backup, for repositories, for whatever you need there, and then needing to keep IT resources current and reduce costs. Let me go back to one slide here real quick, if I may. I've got a few minutes. Let me go back to this architecture slide. Let's say that I ship all this to you, and I ship it with 14 terabyte hard drives and 7.6 terabyte SSDs. And now, in a year, and you say, Doug, I knew as soon as you ship this stuff to me, there's going to be some major announcement, and now they're going to have 25 terabyte hard drives. I know it's happening. You're going to kill me on this, right? And I say, absolutely not. I will basically assess the drives that you're using and you're not using. Because why? Because I have remote management that was built in the cloud, and I can do all this cool stuff without even leaving my office. And I'm going to say, okay, we're going to jostle some data around on the fly. I see that there's 10 drives that you're not using. I'm going to basically ship you 10 drives. You're going to pull out the 10 drives you're not using. I'm going to plug in the 10 drives of the new 25 terabyte hard drives, and we're going to migrate on the fly away from the 14s to the 25s. Well, that's now going to leave a void of maybe another 10 or 12 drives. So now I'm going to have you pull those out, and I'm going to ship you another 10 drives, and we're going to do this walking upgrade, and you're only going to pay for those drives when you use them. You're not going to pay until you create a VPSA and environment. Let's say that this storage node becomes old. I'll ship out 2 new storage nodes. We'll migrate the VPSAs over to the new storage nodes by moving the cores, and now we'll be able to do that. We've been in business 9 years. Do you believe in the, let's use Amazon Ashburn. Let's say I've been doing this for 9 years. You got to believe that I've moved drives from 200 gigabyte SSDs to now 7.6 terabyte SSDs. I've done that without an outage. I've moved storage nodes without an outage. I've gone from 10 gigabit network to 100 gigabit network without an outage. I built this entire thing by 100% uptime, never having to worry about having to take any of this down as I design this. If you design a typical RAID array, it's usually going to be put in a single point of need, and you're going to have maintenance windows. Well, maintenance windows are gone in my business. We can't have a maintenance window. It has to keep going. So needing to keep your IT resources current at a reduced cost is typically 25 terabyte drives are going to be less expensive than 14 terabyte drives from a consumption perspective. So we're going to pass that savings on to you. So I promised to save a little bit of time, Pete, at the end. Maybe a couple of other questions came in. I know I've got one here that came in that I was watching. Is how do I do maybe a proof of concept? So let's talk about proof of concept real quick.
Sure.
We can do that quite easily. We can do proof of concepts in public clouds. We can do proof of concepts in your data center. We'll ship a certain amount of hardware, and you can basically test the theories that I just went through, and you're going to have the ability to do all this. So proof of concepts, don't shy away from it. We love them. We do them all day long. So I'm going to go ahead. Did you take the console back, Pete?
I did. Yep.
All right, perfect. So back over to you, my friend.
Nice. All right. So final call for questions. We got about 7 minutes left. So if you have a question, please pop them in the Q&A or chat me, whatever's easiest. And we'll just highlight really quickly. If you don't know who XenTegra is, we are a partner of Zadara, and we can run them in our data center as well as help you get them up and running in your own data center. So all the models Doug talked about today, we can support. We're a great partner of Equinix as another example, and a partner of Azure and AWS. So we can mesh and mold to any of the use cases talked about today. But we were born on two things. One, we want to enable you as a customer. So that's why we do all these fun webinars, et cetera. And two, we want to be a great partner to a partner like Zadara. Again, we focus on the solution, not the product. So the solution and in the goals of the solution, and we have our bench of consultants, our managed services. And then, yes, we can help get access to Zadara and sell you the Zadara solution. But I believe in one core premise. Our job in IT is to enable our end users to be successful. So, anything we implement needs to have a user in mind. And if the users are happy, then we've done our job. And last thing we need is them walking down the halls and saying they don't like a solution. So Zadara is a great partner of XenTegra's. This is actually their third webinar with me over the last year. So we're going to have a couple more this year with them. But if you want to check out all our partners, partners.xentegra.com. We work with many partners in the EUC stack, Cisco, et cetera, networking, security. Check it out, and we can plug it into Zadara and build you a nice solution. Bronco.xentegra.com. A couple ways you can get involved, and it plays very nicely into today's conversation. So the first way is we offer what's called Citrix Managed Services. And under the covers, we can build this many different ways, and one of them can include Zadara, but we can also host Zadara in our MSP stack. So if you're interested in having a managed storage option, that's an option as well. But behind this, and the great thing about managed services is the support and the supportability. So if you want to find out more about our managed service offering, you can set up a quick meeting with Trevor and team to discuss the MSP. Another cool way is what we call our micro assessments. So we do assessments of your end user compute environment, your networking, and M365 and Microsoft licensing. If you want to get an assessment done, you get put in the drawing. You can do all four and get 4 times in the drawing. So there's no cap to how many times you can get put in the drawing, but pretty cool. But what I love about the assessments is it's a great way to interview XenTegra and get to know our process and get to know how we work, et cetera. So yes, we will be following up with you. I'll get a recording out like I always do. And if you have any other questions, pop them into the Q&A dialogue. And if we didn't see it, and I check it pretty often, we can follow up with it and schedule a deeper demo. So Doug, before we exit out today, any final kind of thoughts today? Any final anecdotes you want to leave with our panel today?
No, I think the final thoughts are that we're growing at a crazy rate right now. We talked about 300 sites out there today. We're going to be at 1,000 by the end of the year. We're going to be bringing in a lot of different people to be able to bid. You're going to see a Zadara, I like to say, around the corner and up your block. You're going to see our solution there. So you've got choices. Do I want to keep a data center, burning electricity and heat? Probably not. I want to move away from that. Do I want to move that to a colocation facility? Yeah, but the colocation facility is thousands of miles, or to a public cloud, it's thousands of miles away. That's not really good. Do I want to move it to a colocation? Well, yeah, but that means I got to get involved in buying more equipment and doing all this other stuff. What I want to share with everybody is is building an environment out of as a service systems, whether it be through a partner like XenTegra or in your own colocation facility. We take a lot of the guesswork out of it. And I like to say you can't get it wrong. If I ship a whole bunch of SSD drives and you basically decided you need SATA drives or nearline SAS, you don't own anything. You didn't get it wrong. You just say, hey, Doug, my sales, let's say that your sales guys are off selling services or whatever, and you thought you'd need a lot of SSD drives, but you need more SATA drives. We'll just swap them out. And we do that all the time. How often can I do that? As often as you have a need. Nice. It literally is, you cannot get it wrong. Yeah. So that's what I want you to be thinking about. You can move your equipment around. You can do whatever you need. But we are going to be real close to you if we're not already real close to you.
Yeah, and it's funny. We've been a partner for a while now, and I've seen kind of a huge, you guys are growing pretty quickly, and it's fun to see. But then the recent acquisition is a great acquisition as well, because that gets you that true edge story now, which is kind of fun. And so I'm excited about this and look forward to having you on some future webinars as we unfold the edge compute story. So thanks for joining us today, Doug, and all attendees. Thanks for jumping on to our webinar Wednesdays. We do these every week at 2 o'clock. Next week, we have a minor time change. We're going to be doing it at 1 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock because my guest, who is the CEO of Light Networks, couldn't make 2 o'clock work. So I accommodated his schedule. So little note for everybody, 1 o'clock next week, and I'll be sending out that email in the coming days. So hope to see everybody next week. And Doug, thanks for joining us. And as I always say, see everybody on the flip side and see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.